Oops. No, don't like it. I need a good picture of clouds in a circular pattern. I had a good one, but I didn't save it, so I've used it in my sketch. Maybe I can reuse it because I really liked it. Whoops, no, that didn't work. I mean, it does round off the composition quite well, but I'm not super happy with it, so I need to spend some time researching. Whoops. Need to find me some better clouds. Usually, I tend to exclude this process because it's just looking at pictures and trying to figure out what's suitable, but I think since this is my workflow for colorized images, I will just include it because there's no way around it. Sometimes I can research for pictures beforehand, but in this case I have to do it on the fly, and it's also an important process to know what you are actually looking for when searching for reference material. Yeah, some are copyright, and I'd have to take a screenshot if it's worth the image. Whoops. No. No, I don't really like them. Can try to work with this one. I'm merely looking for happy accidents. I'm not really trying to steal someone's image, and I will overpaint the clouds anyway, so there won't be any copyright infringement. But to get some texture into the image, some ideas, it's actually super helpful. Oh, this could work. I mean, this has an interesting dynamic. I'm not sure if I will keep it in, because I've skewed it a little bit so it drags to the center of the image. But this is not 100% what I'm looking for. So the search continues. Whoops. So this might work. This might round off the whole composition. Yeah, I like it. So maybe you can see I'm trying to play a little bit with the values. I have this dark circle. The whole image has basically a dark circle. It's just in order to focus the eye on the main protagonist. And the clouds support the circle. And there is some light play going on and some interesting cloudy shapes. But the main goal is trying to stay focused on the broader composition. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, in this case, you have to balance it a little bit out, but I want some of the light of the lantern go onto the plants. And in case of this spot where it's overlaying his cape, it makes sense, so it's better readable. In other cases, not so much, because they share the same value as the background. So you might reduce it in this case and leave it there where it actually makes sense for contrast and for value separation. Whoops. Don't crash on me. I think since most of the colors are where they're supposed to be, I'm relatively happy with the overall color temperature, it would be reasonable to separate the midground from the background, so there isn't so much interference, and I clean it up more easily, and it can keep the silhouettes so I don't accidentally unsharpen the image. So now comes a slightly tedious task of separating fore and background, so bear with me. Oh, midground and background. But in this case, it's actually even relatively easy to distinguish where the midground starts. I will just basically take the whole ground and the characters with me, and everything behind this foggy layer is the background, so this will be my separation line. I'll make it easier. Oops. I have this weird tendency to smudge a lot, or not weird, but it's necessary for my style of color blending, but it has the disadvantage that sometimes you lose track of how much you have actually smudged, and then your edges lose the necessary sharpness they need to have in order for the image to look somewhat finished. Now, because details are they're not super important to make an image look actually finished. It's the silhouette, having a sharp silhouette, not too sharp, but reasonably sharp. So this is what the eye reads as a clear shape. All the stuff inside the silhouette is secondary at best, because you can basically slap some textures on top of it or use a texture brush, and then you have the grid for the eye. It gets some teeth. But on the other hand, having a good texture or a photo plate is super vital for another part of the process, namely the part where you try to generate ideas, because I find it's easier to have some kind of photo plate with a lot of information, with a lot of noise, so I can start to see interesting things inside that. So it's basically all a question of your methodology, of your workflow. And this is a part where I can't wait for machine learning algorithms to do the job for me. Just tell them, like, please separate the image into X layers, and it will do it for you as best as possible. So I save myself some time on this an uninteresting part of work. Right. Don't crash on me. Yes. Okay, you see, the tool I've been using right now is called Content Aware Filling. It's probably a machine learning tool which just fills your selection with something that it takes from the background, and it's really cool. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't have to. And I just want to fill the space with something from the background, with colors or some pattern from the background. So whenever I erase something from the midground, I don't get like this double layer of the same information, which is helpful and speeds up the process. Okay. So discontinue. We have to push the foreground a little bit so it pops more, because you know the contrast is higher with objects that are closer to the camera. Now I'm planning to smudge some of the buildings in the background, because I copied them. This is someone else's work, and I don't want an infringement, and I don't want to steal their work. I just need the shapes and a little bit of texture for the background to have these buildings there, and some of them are super wrong from in terms of perspective, so I have to correct that. And secondly, the buildings are not important for the content. You just have to see that this is a town, nothing more. And it doesn't have to take away from the attention of the eye too much. Danke. Ja, denke ich auch. Der fällt jetzt mehr ins Auge. Schreibst du gerade an deinem Blogpost? Oder chillst du? Viel Spaß. Okay, cool. Na, dann bist du ja schon ein ganzes Stück vorangekommen. Ui. Das ist ja ein harter Sonntag, den du dir da eingerichtet hast. Ah, ist ja schon fast Abend. Ja. There's one other layer of separation that I want to do, because now that I'm destroying all the texture detail from the images, which is necessary because, you know, this is an image that's going to be probably published. I have to get a better separation between the sky and the background buildings, and this is what I will be trying to do now. So. Hey man, thanks Bazeri. Really appreciate your comment. Das ist eine gute Frage. Eigentlich habe ich mir überlegt, ihm auch ein paar längere Haare zu geben. Vielleicht mache ich das noch. Ups. Alright. Bart kommt auch noch. Keine Sorge. Eins nach dem anderen. Crap. Ja. Just have to clean up a little bit my layer structure. So So I'm repeating this fill-up process with my background again. Okay. Oops. This is a commission. It's actually an interesting project, and I'm allowed to talk about it. Maybe you're familiar with the Grimm brothers and the Grimm tales. It's like two old German brothers who wrote a bunch of tales that were actually quite dark, and Disney adopted them and made them super happy. And one of their ancestors, no, was it an ancestor? Well, basically, one guy who is the descendant of the Grimm brothers wants to do a remake with a slightly darker twist, and he commissioned me to paint a cover and possibly a whole book later for this project. So what I'm trying to do is giving the buildings a better silhouette. And as you can see, when I turn on and off this layer, you get a better separation. Though I personally prefer when it's blurred in altogether, but you cannot read this stuff. And so I'm trying to go for a compromise and making it slightly better readable. And another thing that I could do is adding a little bit more of cloud texture, so you have the contrast in terms of value and in terms of texture. So, boop. Now back to the tedious part. Try to split the screen. Whoops. Maybe this could work. This actually looks quite nice in terms of perspective, so let's see how it blends. This was the best mode already. So a little bit less of this. Not sure. I personally do not think that it gives the image so much more. It's not exactly the look I desired, but yeah, let's give it 40%, and I have to adjust it because it's too blue. Yeah. All right. Okay. There is another technique which you can see artists like Feng Zhu doing a lot, and this is adding also gradients on your layer structure, which gives you several cool options. So what I mean by this is, for instance, the town layer itself. You can make the tops of the roofs be very dark in terms of value, and having a gradient that gets brighter to the ground. So you have a separation from the ground, but you still have a separation from the back layer when it comes to the rooftops. And it actually makes sense because usually on the ground you have fog or something like this. You know, if you try to make it atmospheric, and this is also my goal here, making this misty green, threatening kind of fog. So I can use this effect to enhance the separation even more. So far the theory, so let's see if this works in practical terms as well. But yeah, as you can see, it actually does. I mean, sure, the silhouette is super boring of the buildings. This is something I have to adjust, but the readability is definitely better. And you can play with the gradients in different directions. I mean, buildings that are a little bit more in the background can be more desaturated or more in the fog than buildings that are close by. So it's a very nuanced thing, and so also you have to keep the balance not to make them look transparent or something like this, but it's definitely another tool to help you also establish this foreground background dynamic in your image. Yeah, I think that looks... You know, I personally, again, I love this chaos in an image. I don't know why, I just like it this way. But last time I tried to push myself to make things a little bit more clean, more better readable, just giving a ripe look. Fuck. Okay, I got caught in a detail, but it's also worth being explained. I'm a huge sucker for warm-cold contrast, which means warm highlights, cold shadows. And we do have 2 or 3 light sources here. We have the candle or his lantern, and we have the sky and possibly the ground as well. And when there's only one super warm light source, the shadows have the same temperature as the highlights, and I personally think it's boring. It's like in a, you know, if you watch a submarine movie and you have this red alert and everything is just red, and it's, I don't know, it's just super uninteresting. So I'm trying to force a couple like cool shadows in terms of temperature into the image, like his coat or his shirt, so that the shadows are not too warm. Otherwise, they appear kind of dirty for me personally. So I'm trying to balance that out. And actually, for printing, this might be also really interesting, because then you don't have too much color on top of one spot. You might equalize, harmonize the amount of color that is being used, so stuff doesn't get too dark, which is always an issue with printing. And probably I will also extract the fountain, not the fountain, the well, as a separate object, so I can make sure that it stays on a separate layer, and mistake, that it's still popping, because it's a very important element of the image and I want to make sure that it remains readable. Right. Oops. Hey, it's just honest. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm really happy that you noticed that and appreciate it. Curves. Let's see. Whoops, mistake. Not what I wanted. I want to push the characters more against the background because they still blend in too much for my taste. And it's always good to have some kind of self-referencing going on. So whenever you make a change that affects like half your image, just make sure that you switch between your previous state and your current state. Like, I'm exaggerating here, so you can see if this is a desired effect you want to have or not, right? So for certain parts of the image, you get a cool contrast and the both characters really pop from the background, which is good. But in the other parts, those two characters have more contrast than the stuff in my foreground, than all these branches, which is not desirable again. So I want to figure out if I can find a middle ground, or if I can just apply this thing only to certain parts of the image. In this case, for instance, the clothes on certain parts, I want them to have more contrast. So either I'll go ahead and try to burn them, you know, with this, is it the burn tool? Yes, the burn tool. You know, so I can adjust them locally, but it just has a certain way of working, which I'm not sure if this is what I want for this particular process right now. So I will just duplicate my characters, adjust the curves, because they give me just a different kind of effect, slightly, like this. So it's actually enough. And I'll erase everything that has too much contrast. So for instance, the head doesn't have to have so much contrast. It's just the legs and part of the clothing that are too dark. It's a minor effect, but it just keeps the image sharp and fresh and popping for me. All right. Let's see if it works when I turn it around. Yeah. Oops, it does. You probably all know this, but mirroring the image is also widely used. And I like to tell the story that the old masters, as they are called, they didn't have a mirroring tool. Obviously, they didn't have computers, but they used a real mirror and sometimes painted while looking on the mirror just to check if the composition is right or not. And here, while mirroring, I actually see something that I don't like, and this is part of the foreground, namely this area, because it intersects weirdly with this, with the well, and I want it to look a little bit more interesting. So I will try to fix that. Toasting with the left hand, amazing. Thanks for the additional anecdote. What fascinates me about it is how someone actually discovered it, that you get a fresh look while looking at your image in the mirror. But yeah, probably when you work on art your whole life, sooner or later you get new ideas and techniques how to refresh your eye, basically. So yeah, that looks better. All right. Now give me 5 minutes, please. I want to get me some coffee, and then I will be back. See you in a couple of minutes. Okay. Trying to fix something that is a little bit illogical, because the way how I blend my colors is I have everything on one layer and just smudge it together until I get the right values and the cool color transitions. But that means that sometimes colors from the foreground bleed into the background where they don't logically belong. You can leave it that way. I personally like this look, but once again, I'm trying to make things, get out of my comfort zone here and there, and make readability my primary goal. So I try to get rid of everything that's not supposed to look the way how it looks now, and just trying to get rid of the orange and yellow tones that have been bleeding into the background. Because later on I will add another layer of glow, because it's a very foggy and misty atmosphere, and this will, basically return this look, but in a more logical and in a more readable and believable manner, I hope. The only thing that I have to be cautious about is making things too dull, which at some points the image has the tendency to go to, like with the silhouettes, because they're super boring right now. It's just super rough masks, and later on I have to go in and try to erase something into the silhouette that gives me more information, like this is a rooftop made out of tiles and not of straight lines or something like this. So yeah, something like this, because this helps a lot of giving the image more life. But yeah, I will do this later on with the proper reference. Right now I just need it for a clear what's called clear separation and readability. One other element that I want to add is a bright spot in the sky. So this gives me an interesting interplay with these two light sources, because I can use the sky to give the characters a rim light, like a small blue outline, and this also helps readability. It looks cool, and yeah, this is basically the idea behind it. But I also might already put in the effects layer just for giggles to see the effect of it. Something like this could be really interesting. Maybe it's too strong, but it definitely makes sense for me personally. But I will leave it off because when I'm color picking, I will pick the wrong colors when it's on, just for, you know, effects, for mastering, for the final product, so to speak, or one of the final steps. What's going on? Oops. Oh, better. Better. This is way better. Oops. Maybe you can see here what I mean by rim light. This outer edge of her dress basically reflects the moonlight or whatever it is, this light source, and it helps get more interest into the image. It just makes it look more artistic. It helps the readability. It has a lot of advantages. Basically exaggerating this effect in an artistic manner. Helps to give you also a little bit of indication of how the drapery falls of the dress, which is also, you know, serves another purpose, gives the image more dynamic, gives us information about her pose, about the wind direction. There's so many things that are going on. So it's an effect I really love using. But yes, I will leave it like this. No. Okay. Doesn't work. Right now here I'm just erasing the old texture of the well because it's stretched. I had to stretch it quite a bit to get it somewhat into the right perspective, and there's like always a double process involved. So in my workflow, at least for images that have to be published, for pure concept art it's not that important, but to get the right values and an illustration style into your image, I use photo plates for the first iteration, just to have an idea, just to have some grasp on what's going on, and then I smudge over them so I get the right values, and then I reintegrate textures here and there just to keep the detail density. And since I have a layer of proper colors and proper values already, just a notch of textures that you have to put on top in the end to get the right effect. So you can make sure that your initial idea in terms of colors remains. So this is the reason why sometimes I have to put 2 or 3 times photo plates in the whole process into the image. Might seem redundant, but there is no other way around it. At least I haven't found one yet. Yes, just honest. That is correct. Well, yeah. If you're working for the industry, yes, it's about readability, because your image doesn't stay by itself. It's supposed to go to someone else, like a 3D artist or an environment artist or whoever. So they have to understand what you're trying to communicate to them. But I have like this conflict because I really love unreadable images. I love images that have so much detail, that are so unlayered that you can interpret tons of things into it. Or I don't know, just my brain likes confusing stuff. It's the same with music. I really love confusing music. But you cannot deliver these kinds of pieces to a client that depends on readability, or if you're somewhere in the production pipeline where the next artist depends on understanding your idea. And this image is obviously for a presentation, so it has to be readable, or at least have the right balance between letting the audience enough space to interpret it, but also making the overall idea clear. So yeah, that's probably the nature of things. Because sometimes I think I fool myself when I'm painting, and I love to call it finished when it's actually at a super unreadable state. And if I'm an artist who sells his own images, that might be my style. That might be something that sells. So it depends where you're standing, I think. Yes, yes. An artist's artist. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Like musicians making music not for everyday people but for musicians. They tend also to go into jazz or progressive metal and complicated stuff. Yeah. Yeah, but you totally understand what this is about. I mean, I can read it from your comments. I think in the end it's good to be versatile, right? There are some commissions that have to be readable, and then if you're doing stuff for yourself, you can do whatever you want, right? But you got me curious. What are you doing? I mean, do you work in the industry, or do you try to work to get into the industry? How much experience do you have with art and all these things? Not sure if this works. Ah, I see. Cool. So, quite the academic interest. That's rare. Yes. Hmm. Maybe you can comment on something that has been running through my mind, because when I started doing art, I usually looked up contemporary, concept art on the internet, basically digital art, because I love the appeal of it. And there is, as you wrote, a whole scene, not only a streamer scene, but like ArtStation on certain Facebook groups and so on and so forth. And obviously, there have been some stars among artists and hobbyists that can make a living out of art, and it fooled me into believing that you don't have to produce something materialistic. It's enough to paint something on your computer and spread it through the net. But lately I've discovered a good way to actually make money out of your art is to print it on something that you can grasp, right? Onto a real product. And my question would be, how do you analyze, experience this transition from analog art to digital art, or even back, digital art, printing onto some analog medium, and in correspondence to the value of art, the monetary value of art, if my question makes sense, hopefully. Oh, yes, Adam Neely. Yes, I know this guy. I love him. Just to round this up. Yeah, it's a super nerdy YouTube channel. Yeah, I see. You are. Wait a second. Yeah, it's clearly visible that you exactly know what you're talking about by counter asking me this question. Um, oh man, dude, I have to think about this for a second, because for me, I'm confused by all these different um, segments that you have written down. Because concept art for me is, I love it. It's amazing, but it's been produced in masses, which kind of devalues it in a certain way, because it doesn't have this unique appeal anymore, you know? Or maybe it has, but because people are not printing it or not exhibiting it as fine art, it just doesn't have any value. It's digital, you can copy it. And so there is this intersection between concept art and fine art. And again, as you said, yeah, the contrast between craftsmanship and actually real, artsmanship is also, it's it's a different, yeah, feel free to type your thoughts, because I know some really good craftsmen that don't consider themselves as an artist, which might be a psychological barrier. So I'm not sure where one border starts and ends. So this is the reason why I'm asking, probably. Yeah. Which makes the stream increase in philosophical value by a factor of 100, and this is appreciated from my side. actually. Mm. So fine art is not necessarily about the quality of the work, but all the surrounding elements, I assume. Oops. Way too strong. Just a minor. Yes, I see your point. In a competition sense, readability sticks out. I just know that I've heard that in Japan they design the images in a way that's absolutely not clear what's the direction, how to read the images, and so it's like a huge mosaic, and you find bits and pieces everywhere, and you discover basically the image from your own way of seeing things. Yeah. Okay. Hollywood's appeal. But then again, you might have counter movements, right? If everything is readable, the ones that are unreadable but in an interesting way will stick out from theoretically. What do you think? Yeah, okay. I think there is even a name for this effect, but of course I don't have it at my hand. Okay, I have to take care of the face because this is the worst rendition. Sorry, I'll just share what I'm looking at. For the other guys in the chat, the Night Watcher will be played by a real actor, and I try to paint him a little bit like the real actor. Yes, Bob Ross, but it's not. Is it art what he's doing, or is it more some kind of, I will say, just therapeutic way of painting? Because the motives are a little bit, yeah, they're not cutting edge, you know. But I don't want to interrupt your argumentation, just throwing in some ideas. Oops. No. Hey, Rosh. You just stumbled in the middle of a super highly academic and philosophical discussion about art. Yeah. I don't know, maybe I'm super biased, but in terms of modern art, the exhibitions I've been to were always the same. Something that is executed really badly, it has no aesthetic at all, and the meaning was always you could condense it to something that is critical of our society, you know. Whatever there was, it was always a symbol for the same criticism. Maybe it was super hipster stuff, I don't know. Maybe I went to the wrong exhibitions, but there was never something that really blew me away in terms of meaning. There was modern and abstract art that was in itself super aesthetic because the artist, you know, just took ages to sculpt something that maybe has no content, but the shape, it's like graphical design. It had something that was super appealing. Oh, but thanks for the link. I will bookmark it. The art assignment. I see. Oh yeah, Jason Pollock. Thanks, man. I'll put it on a bookmark. but just... Sorry, I'm just wandering with my thoughts because there were... Oh, wait, you're just writing so... homogeneous nowadays. Yes, that's a very nice way to say it. Rosh, you sent me a link of the German keeper. Do you see any resemblance between the actor and him, or is this some reference material you want me to use? Okay. It's actually a commission. Ah. I have... Okay, hold on. One after the other. I don't have a blog. I have an Instagram or a Twitter or something like this, if this helps you some way. But not really a blog. Or maybe my YouTube channel or something like this. And to Roche, I'm working on a commission. This is a client's work. And one of the descendants of the Grimm brothers, who wrote the Grimm Tales, they are trying to revive the old Grimm Tales in a more darker look, and I'm supposed to paint the cover and illustrate the books that they want to publish. So unfortunately, I'll have to stick with the specs, which dictate that I have to paint a specific face from a specific actor. Yeah. Well, it's not 100% sure if this project will get going. This is basically like expose that I'm working on, and we're trying to get some funds in, and if this works, then yeah, I'll have to illustrate the book. Yeah, but still, thanks for your creative input. No, everything is fine. I'm not going to stream too long anyway, so I would really love to stay in touch with you, because I love a fresh, balanced academic perspective on art. Really, I do. Because in the internet is full of fanatics and extremists, and it's impossible to talk about art. Just let me drop the YouTube channel in. So if you want, you can follow me here and just spam all your intelligent comments. Well, spamming is the wrong word. Please comment with all your ideas so we can have a discussion, a cool discussion on the net. All right, back to work. Whoops. Was already the right. Just need to find a more worried face. I know he has some. Yeah, this one was cool. And he can look really grim, this dude. Whoops. And what was it? This one. Alright, so yeah, once again, I'm just using the texture of his face to orient myself, but more importantly, I want to get the palette into his face, because he has a reflection of the sky on one of his, on the cheek side, one of the sides of his face, and the other one is lit by the lamp, and this is more important than the details and all the things, so I have to smudge this in first and then make another pass in terms of textures to get all the details in. My pathway into art, I remember that I loved to draw stuff that I've seen in the television since I was a kid. There was, I don't know, Star Wars, and I watched it, and out of my imagination I painted starships and all kinds of designs. It came naturally when I was young. When I went to school, I had one art teacher. He said, "Oh, you have a lot of potential, but you're not really good at mimicking life. You paint from your mind, and this is just, this is child's play. This is nonsense." He was really old-fashioned, so as a kid, I believed him. I thought, oh man, there is like a higher level to art than what I'm doing, so I should listen to him, because he was like 60-something and I was like barely 13. So I went to his private school for 4 or 5 years and learned how to paint by, looking at things and copying things one-to-one, and I became really good at it, but it killed my fun in art. It totally lost every interest in art because it was boring as fuck. I'm sorry. And he was like a super old school traditional guy who couldn't really paint out of his imagination, and probably, just tried to share his misery or something like this. I don't know. And during this time, I really was interested in anime and animation, and I started to animate. And I built myself like a light table, and made everything like from analog materials and animated a little bit, which was super tedious but super fun, because it had the right intersection between technology and art. I did this for a couple of years. Then I came into my 20s. Yeah, art teachers. I came into my 20s and wanted to make a living as an animator. but I realized that there is no real market for it, and if there is one, you basically grind yourself to the bone. I wouldn't want to trade with any of the anime animators in Japan. So I searched for something else, and I stumbled upon concept art because this was really super fascinating. The images were really spoke to me. I had a career in games for 5 years approximately, and then I left the games industry because it's just it's a super hard and business unsavvy, how should I say, scene. And now I'm trying to make a living as a freelance illustrator, graphic designer. I have my own short movie project on the go. I basically do many different things, and art is just one of them to pay my rent. So, yeah, so much to my biography. I hope it's not too much of a sob story. Yeah, I think so. I would say I've made every mistake there is like 100 times, so I definitely know what not to do. At least I hope. Yeah, man, but I live in Berlin and I know a lot of artists here, and man, there is some weird shit going on with people who are into art. I have the feeling they all wait for someone to recognize their talent, take them by the hand, and tell them, "Here, I got a super steady job for you. Just work for me. Here's your pay. Do your art all day long so you don't have to worry about anything else." This is basically the ideal. There are some people who achieve this, but the companies who hire artists here in Berlin are like, there are 2 or 3 companies who are really on an super interesting, visually interesting concept art level, and the rest is just, I don't know how they survive, to be honest. Huh. Yeah, poor kid. I mean, it's possible. I think I'm still convinced it's possible to make a living as a concept artist, but you should see yourself as a businessman first. You should know how to sell yourself and how to promote yourself. And this is something almost every artist is bad at, except a couple of people who, are brave enough to stream regularly and expose themselves to, trolls and people on the internet. And I think streaming is one thing, but actually, having your own gallery is another thing. Oh, there comes the best example. Yesterday was the opening. I will answer this question a bit. Yesterday there was an opening of an exhibition, of my exhibition. I asked a cafe here in Berlin if they want to exhibit my images, and I printed them, and I organized an opening, and I paid quite a bit of money to, have this all organized. But the bad thing was the prints came out too dark. They didn't work with coating, and I was super pissed, and I thought, man, these images are going to hang there for 3 months, and I'm super unhappy with it, and I hope no one else, yeah, thank you, no one else notices the mistake basically I made, because I made the wrong contrast or whatever. It's just not, the print didn't serve them well. And I will just put it how it is. I hate myself for that. It annoys me, and I really have to deal with it. I have to be more careful with myself, and yeah, I can imagine that for other artists it's even harder, maybe. Yes, exactly. Man, you're a very attentive person. And to your question, if the profession is over-glamorized, yes. I think musicianship, art, is super over glamorized by everyday people, because they don't understand the process behind it, but also by people who want to get into it. I think they romanticize it, and they have romanticized expectations about it, which will lead to a point where they have to decide if they want to do it professionally and accept that there is a lot of work attached to it, or if they say, no, I just rather work at McDonald's and just paint in my spare time because I don't want to deal with all this deadlines and stress, which is totally legit from my point of view. Probably got me traumatized with this stupid printing stuff. But next time I will do it differently. Different printing techniques. Ich streame noch 10 Minuten. Wieso fragst du? Hm. Du kannst dir noch jetzt schrubben gehen, also du musst dich nicht gezwungen fühlen, hier in meinem Stream abzuhängen. Aber danke. Yes, to just honest. Use honest. Just honest. Yes, I think this is well, it's a broader question, because, of course, superficially seen, I would say it's a problem of the generation. Many people see all these YouTube stars, the self-made streaming stars, like Dr. Disrespect. He earns like, I don't know, $100,000 per month just for playing computer games. And you get inspired by it. Apparently everyone can do it, but not everybody, if you understand the difference I'm trying to imply. And they focus on it. And this creates maybe wrong expectations. And I have to say, I'm probably guilty of that as well, because some things I did were aimed at becoming famous. Then I created art, I made animations, I wrote a song, and so on and so forth. And I thought this is the best shit ever because I really put a lot of energy into it. And I published it, and no one cared. And I was like, whoa, okay, so basically doing a really good product is only half the work. The other half is promoting the shit out of it. And then maybe you will get famous. But I think quality will always, what's the word? Persevere. The quality will be recognized, but you have to jump over your shadow. You have to be brave enough to believe in the quality of your work and actually convince people that your work is good, especially if you do stuff that is maybe ahead of its time. You know what I'm trying to get at? Und Aschennebel, das ist kein Spam, keine Sorge. Hey, I speak 3 languages: German, English, and Russian. Man, I hope I've been using the right word. Prevail. I have to look it up. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. But then again, значит, не показалось. Может быть, мой акцент немножко проходит через английский. Yeah, I think quality will prevail, but you can be the best artist in the world. If you don't share your work, then we are again at the beginning question. What is it worth? You know? There is one word, it's not word, a term. It's called consens narrative. So basically, for instance, a musician like Mozart is considered to be a genius. I personally absolutely don't like him. But the consens narrative says, yeah, there have been a lot of academics who have been analyzing his music and they've come to the conclusion that he is a genius. Well, okay, this is one point of view, but there is also taste and opinion. And some artists are being super hyped where even a producing person who is, into the craft would say, I don't see the point sometimes. So I think promoting yourself effectively also has an influence on your perceived value as an artist and musician. I hope this kind of makes sense. But interestingly, I thought that my English would have more of a German accent than a Russian one because I rarely talk Russian. German is my strongest language. Great. Oh man, I hate to choke it. How should I say it? To end the discussion. I will end streaming in 5 minutes because I have a lot of stuff to do. But there is a saying in German: always end when it's the best time, or when it's when stuff is on its peak. So I might stay true to this saying. Russian accent for me, it would sound like this. This is like heavy Russian accent. But you're not the first one to tell me that, so maybe there is some kind of intermingling between my mother tongue and English. Cool, man. Thanks a lot for the discussion. It was super, super refreshing, really. And please comment on the YouTube channel and stay in touch. All right. See you next time. Peace out. All right. Just gonna smooth it a little bit out, the colors and the face, and then I'm off. And what always bothered me is his arm. Oops. Man, I'm really happy to hear that. I'm I am also not a huge fan of Russian accent. I don't know. I assume it has to do with my upbringing. I don't have the best pictures of Russians anyway, so might be a negative association. Fair enough. All right. Yeah, I'm past my 2 hour mark. So once again, thank you everyone for stopping by, for talking to me, and yeah, man, people, I hope you have a great start in the week. I hope you're healthy and productive for your own sake, not your boss's sake, of course. See you around next time, and enjoy the week. Peace out. Bye.